Is it Amara or Amara?
Amara.
Okay, Dr. Amara Pope, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, thank you for being here. I remember when I got the email and the press release for the article that you did, what was stated as Canadians Redefining R&B. Mm-hmm. The title in itself really hit me first because I was like, I've never really thought about that. I never really thought about Canadians redefining R&B. So before we dive into that, we want to dive a little bit more into who you are. So who is Dr. Amara Pope?
Well, I recently graduated with my PhD in media studies. I have long been interested in different forms of communication. So I went down the academic route and I got an undergraduate degree in fine arts and English. It was a double degree, as well as a digital media specialization. That led me to do a master's. But when I got to the master's, I realized I wanted to study communications in a more accessible medium. And that led me to explore music videos. And I looked at how Drake represented identity in different music videos. And that's what kind of led me to do the TEDx talk, more press, to talk about academic theory, but in popular culture. So I look at identity politics, I look at race and how it's embedded in different music genre categories. And then I look at that history of Canadian R&B and the rise of Canadian R&B when I did my PhD. So I've always found an interest in bringing academia into popular culture and looking at how we can take those theories and actually apply them in everyday life, specifically in music, because I find music is such a beautiful medium for breaking down barriers when it comes to segregation, when it comes to national differences. And I think that music is just a beautiful vehicle to do that.
For myself, relatable. I didn't really learn much about Black history in school, and I feel like a lot of people don't. So why did you decide to start there as one of the points to dive into Canadians redefining R&B?
Yeah, well, when I look at the history of Canadian R&B, I have to look at the representations of Black identities in music and how those representations of Black identities shaped music genre categories today. And found that that began all the way back in minstrelsy, where we had Black and white performers creating negative stereotypes about Black identities in music, and how that then led to ideas of what Black identities are, Black lifestyles are, and then what Black music is. And that eventually led to the billboards, for example, being informed about how to classify music through ideas of Black singles or R&B music, which was heavily steeped in what they considered Black America. So I had to do that historical analysis and then also look at why we weren't seeing diversity represented in the mainstream music in Canada, and found that, you know, the 1960s and 70s Toronto was bustling with so many R&B bands. We had Crack of Dawn, for example, who had been outselling bands like Earth, Wind and Fire in ticket sales and album sales, and yet they weren't getting recognition in Canada. So we had this deep, deep need and passion for R&B music, but it wasn't reflected in mainstream media. So I had to go all the way back to representations of identity and Black identities to realize that it was because Canadian media and music was deeply racist. And that's why any kind of person participating in what was quote unquote Black music was left out of television and mainstream airways and on the radio. So looking back at that history of representations of Blackness really informed my study in exploring what Canadian R&B is and how it was portrayed.